Welcome to this Aztlander presentation, Ancient Maya Roads, Ancient Maya Skies, with Mark Elmy, ceremonialist, astronomer, and photographer. Enjoy!
Oh, well, thank you, Jim, and thank you everybody for showing up tonight. And obviously, well, a lot of it came out in the title anyway. This is going to be a journey, or my journey, my connection with walking the paths that take us to El Mirador, this trek in the forest. Um, but I really felt like I ought to introduce myself a bit first, just so that you know, because obviously I'm not from Guatemala. I'm not even from this side of the Atlantic. And when people ask me where I'm from, I like to show them. So here we are. This is the UK, and we see over in the eastern counties the little town of Ipswich. And actually, where I was educated is a smaller town called Woodbridge. And as Jim said, after that, I then went off to go and become a polymer chemist, specializing in resins for paints. Actually, sorry, that slide kind of went a bit wonky. My apologies for that. Um, but the reason why I put this in particular is partly to honor the archaeology of the area that I grew up in. Because where I grew up, there's one of the UK's most famous archaeological sites. And what we find in the area that I come from is firstly, there's a royal burial, and secondly, there's a lot of ancient roads. And I thought, well, that's quite interesting because that really ties in with what I'm doing tonight. And you may recognize this. This is the helmet, which is the emblem of the British Museum, which was the helmet of that was found in a Anglo-Saxon ship burial from about the 7th century. It's thought to be King Redwold. I always think it's kind of interesting because it's contemporary with the classic Maya period, but this is, what comes from where I came from. Now, if you, I'm sure that many of you have heard of it. If you haven't, there's a Netflix film called The Dig, which is quite interesting. It's a dramatization, of course, but like it's kind of interesting to see kind of what was going on in the 1930s in East Anglia. Now, the other thing that was in our area was also a lot of Roman remains. And I like old maps, in particular old paper maps. And on those old paper maps, you could see all of these roads that would be converging in particular places. And so places like Camladunum, which is now Colchester, and Combretomium, which is now Codnam, which is very close to where I grew up, you can still see the evidence of these roads. And I kind of thought that was interesting because this is like the Sacbe'ob of the area that I come from, and how, kind of like this is still here. And I used to have a landscaping company at one point, and we went along to one particular site that we were looking at. The archaeologists had gone in to strip back the top 6 inches of topsoil. And you could see all of this black grid work. It was like all yellow, sandy soil with these black lines in it. And I said to them, well, what's that? And they said, well, these are the ditches of the Roman fields. And to realize that this is just kind of like a foot beneath the level that we're walking on was quite interesting. So, anyway, of course, this gives us an interest, or gave me an interest in the past. Now, as Jim finally introduced me there, my journey with the Maya really started in 1998 when I was introduced to the Maya calendars by a couple called Michael Baker and Patricia Mercier. And I went along to their school, teaching about Maya subjects, Maya calendars, and that kind of thing. And I ended up going to an event that they'd helped put together, where some elders from the Americas had come over to talk with us. Now, it was there that I met a chap called Alberto Ruz Buenfil, and he's the son of Alberto Ruz Loyola, who was the archaeologist that found the tomb of Pacal at Palenque. And I don't know what it was, but it seemed like every time that I met up with Alberto, there was going to be an adventure kind of like taking place not long after that. So that was May of 1998. By May of 1999, I'd quit my job, sold my house, and bought a ticket to Mexico to go over and have a look for myself and go and find out more about the calendar, go and find out more about culture. Um, so I actually went back a couple of times just for brief sort of couple of weeks stints in 2005 and 2006. And then when 2008 came around again, my love or obsession with the calendar had got to such a point that once again I quit my job, sold my possessions, and that time moved to Guatemala more permanently. In January 2010, I met Rigoberto at a Washiki Bats event in Momostenango. And from then we started making fires together and spent a lot more time together, which eventually led me to be initiated as an Nakbe in February 2015. It was never really my intention to, to follow that path. It was just what happened to be kind of like the logical thing eventually. So, kind of like that was my side with the calendar. Now, um, as was mentioned, my journey with El Mirador began in 1995 when I read a magazine article, and it really got me inspired about this idea about going out into the jungle and going and doing these kind of things. And I'm not the world's fittest person. This is not something that comes naturally to me. And so, the fact that you could be done without training very much appealed to my adventurous yet not quite so fit side. And I have to say that the first time that I did it, it was probably one of the hardest things that I've ever done. I used to do some endurance mountain biking, so kind of like I'd fairly got some legs on me and that kind of thing. But this was something else. Now, that didn't stop me. I went back another 5 times, and the latest time being March of this year. Now, I always walk the 6 day trek. I think I started with the 6 day trek simply because, firstly, if I'm going to, go to the trouble to go up to Peten and, kind of like go and walk this, it just seemed, kind of like it was the more logical thing to do. It's like just one more day, and so why not just add that on? And it's a circular route rather than a linear route, which is also, something which appealed to me. Um, the only thing is that the fifth day is a 34-kilometer walk. And that was the bit which is the hardest of all because, that I had maybe not quite estimated correctly. But as I said, it didn't stop me from going back there again. And main reason why I go back there again is because of two sites, Nakbe and Wakna, which are incredibly interesting, and I'll show you them later on. And yes, 6 days without power, without phone signal, with bucket showers, camping in the jungle, and no internet, and dark skies, and the beautiful sounds of the jungle. It's just it's a wonderful retreat that's well worth doing on an annual basis in my experience anyway. And my feeling really genuinely is that if I really want to understand better, I think it's important to go and walk those roads and be under those skies. So it is all about timing. This is, part of the calendar, the Chokik, the sacred calendar, is very much there to help us, I think, guide us to have a more fulfilling life. And really, everything's about timing, isn't it? And for me, my preference is to walk the Mirador Trek in March or April. That's dry season in Peten. And I've heard about people going in November or that kind of like November or December and having to be rescued by the army. And I kind of don't want to be in that kind of like headline story. The wonderful thing about dry season is there's virtually no mosquitoes or mud to bother about. You know, you kind of see the movie of the jungle explorers and they're constantly swatting the mosquitoes, but in March or April, it's very, very rare that they come about. There's also beautiful clear skies because it's dry season, so it's great for astronomy. And this is quite different to where I live at the lake, where you quite often find that there's a lot of dust in the atmosphere. So it's, kind of like a nice place to go take pictures of the sky. Now, the only thing is, from that slide shows, one of the great uh, things on this journey, which is ticks. Now, they're not ticks that carry disease or anything like that, but there are a lot of them and they congregate on the leaves like this. We'll see this later on. So, most of the time when I take a journey to El Mirador, there's a reason behind it, whether it's special days within the sacred calendar, whether it's special days with regards to an astronomical phenomenon or something like that. I usually try and time it around the new moon so that we're going to really make the most of those dark skies. If the skies are dark to the because of the lack of light pollution there, we really want to make the most of them. So one of the other things that really got interesting to me was the Venus table of the Dresden Codex. Now, coming from the background that I come from, I'm not coming from an academic background. And when I moved to Guatemala in 2008, there wasn't really home internet. There was, I mean, we had these modem like internet, what do you call it, like modems, and you'd see the hamster wheel just to send a line of text. So any kind of serious research just wasn't going to happen at that kind of time. And the same with the contacts that I had or whatever, like I couldn't really find any particularly, let's say, specialist books. And so I had to deal with what I had. And one of the books that I'd taken with me from England was Dennis Tedlock's translation of the Popol Vuh. And as I read it for the umpteenth time, I got interested in this table, which is in the back, in the notes of the back of this Popol Vuh. There is his translation of the Venus table of the Dresden Codex. And I started looking at it, and I think it just happened to be a time when Venus was reappearing as the morning star, and it started getting me interested in what if we could apply this table to the present day? Would it still work? And if it was, how could we, like where were we in the table? Kind of like to see, like take this technology and use it now and see if it still works. So that got me all interested in it. And so I started following the movements of Venus really since about then, and certainly since about 2015. Now, Atitlan is a great place in that it's got a relatively dark sky, but of course, being an ancient supervolcano, it's also got a lip in every direction, so you can't have a flat horizon. Everything is already raised. And you can see this kind of like I'll show you. This is there's a time lapse I took on July 22nd of this year. Here's sorry, and here's Venus. Here's the moon over here. This was Jupiter down here, and there was Orion rising over the lake just there too. And so you can see that raised horizon as we look over the lake. So anyway, going back to the Venus table, I decided that the best thing to do would be to create a spreadsheet. And here, this is one of the correlation spreadsheets that I tried to create. And so I've been looking through various astronomy sites to find out when would be the heliacal rise of Venus. And as I was calibrating it, what I realized was that in this year we would have Venus rise as the morning star on the day 12 Achpu, which was the 28th of March. And the 29th of March was a new moon too. So it fitted into my timing with regards to it being dry season. And it also seemed like, well, that was what guided my Mirador trek for this year anyway. I decided, if I wanted to go and watch it rise on the horizon, what better place to do that than from on top of El Tigre at El Mirador. So here, I think this is running. This looks like it might be glitching a little bit. But this is the actual pages from the Dresden Codex. And I don't know whether that's showing up correctly for you, but there's that 12 Arpu date highlighted in there. So, what about the logistics of getting there? So, actually going out and walking the talk, going and seeing these sites firsthand and getting up there. Now, the first thing to do, of course, is to get up to Peten from Guatemala City. And I've done it in several different ways. The first couple of times I made the trek, I actually took the night bus from Guatemala City up to Flores. And this is so I went from Lake Atitlan to Guatemala City, which takes the best part of, kind of like 3 to 4 hours. And then about 10 o'clock at night, you get on the night bus and you kind of sleep on the night bus as you arrive in Flores at 6 a.m. the next day. And this is a good and relatively cheap route. But the last time that I went on that bus, when we were in Peten, it kind of broke down every 10 minutes. And once the aircon goes out on those things, it's like being in a kind of sauna. So, like, that was the last time that I took that night bus. Now, in 2021, I actually decided that I would drive up there. And this was wonderful to drive all the way from Atitlan up to Carmelita. We stopped in Peten and then we went off to Yashar and Tikal. And having the freedom to explore by having my own vehicle was a really, really awesome thing to do. But it is also extremely long days. And, kind of like after all that driving, kind of like that's just to go and begin the trek. So you kind of like begin with your energy a little bit sapped, and it wasn't exactly maybe the best way to do it. Now, the last couple of years, it's actually become a lot cheaper to fly. And if you time it right and you travel light, you can actually find a return flight from Guatemala to Flores for about $100, not that much more. And it's 50 minutes to fly up there. So, this makes it a lot more manageable. It's a lot easier to do. So, we get to Flores and we have this early start because we're going to drive up to Carmelita. And the rather I don't know, the Google there says 2 hours and 13 minutes to get there. Well, it's much more like 3.5 hours when you take that route. We leave Flores around about 5 a.m. And, as we're driving up, we actually get the sunrise coming up over Lake Petenitza. And that was sunrise this year. Then we hit the dirt road at San Andres. Now you can see from the map, you can see where the forest is, where Tikal is, and you can see what it's like here. Deforested and undulating ground. And there is a lot of this dirt road to go on. It's quite a journey. This is a main crossroads where we stop for a little bit of a snack along the way for the brave as we make our way up to Carmelita. And Carmelita, I find to be a very, very interesting place. This is the place where we're going to find our guides with the cooperativa that take us out into the jungle. Now, Carmelita, you saw the undulating ground as we go up there, but Carmelita is very, very flat. And it's not a big stretch of the imagination to see that this thing is an old airfield. And it seems very strange that you've got an airstrip just kind of in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of nowhere. And I've also been to a site called Washaktun, where you will also see, like the site is literally divided by an airstrip. And you think, well, why are the airstrips there? And it's all because of the chicle industry, where they used to use the gum of the chico zapote tree to make chewing gum. Now, this industry was huge from the late 19th century, from the 1890s through to about the 1980s, and it peaked in the 1940s. And to give an idea, in 1945, the population of Peten was around about 11,500, and apparently there was about 3,000 chicleros registered. So almost like, a quarter of the population of Peten was working in that industry. And the chicle would be taken out of the jungle, boiled down, and then put into small planes, which would be taken down to Flores, and then flown down to Guatemala City. Um, Now, it's a highly dangerous industry, highly dangerous work. The forest is full of snakes and mosquitoes and ticks and disease, and apparently the actual tapping season was during rainy season. Can't imagine what conditions would have been like out there. And so, kind of like these very, I want to say very tough people, very I think also very in touch with their work, with who they were, what they were doing. There's also folkloric legends of the little people of the forest, the duendes. And apparently, these were small bearded men in hats that lived in the jungle. They were like the nature spirits, and they're kind of like supposedly connected with the Maya Alush spirits. And they like cigars. That's what they wanted. And so there was a really interesting story that I read while I was preparing this presentation. I was reading these stories about the chicleros, and there was one old chiclero that was only getting 6 or 7 pounds of chicle out of the trees. And so he took cigars out to one of the duendes. He had to take 6 cigars out each time, and then he'd get like about 100 pounds of resin coming in. And then one day he decided not to do it anymore, and his resin fell back down. But apparently, that's one of the stories. But kind of like it's interesting to see that folklore out there. So very, very hard workers, very, very hard life, I think. And it was the chicleros that found many of the sites out in the jungle that would come and report them, because they set up their buckets on the trees. They would score the chico zapote trees to collect the gum, and while they're waiting for the gum to fill the buckets, they're going around having a look around and seeing what else is out there. And so that's how we ended up with knowing some of the sites are there. And of course, now that there's no industry up there of the same way, they look after the forest. The forest is under the protection of the Carmelita cooperative, to make sure there's no illegal logging going on. But there is, of course, managed logging, managed forestry, cattle ranching, and chate palms, which are this kind of like foliage that is used worldwide for floristry, apparently, which is one of the biggest exports of Peten. I also found that out recently. So it's kind of interesting to see that coming out. There's also copal trees up there, which is also, quite a major industry. Now, of course, the other thing that they're doing is guiding. And, we see year by year more and more tourists going out to go to El Mirador. So let's go for a walk. The first day is kind of like, I describe it as it's a bit like a warm up day. It's about 10 miles. 92 Fahrenheit, 33 Celsius, 88% humidity. So it's hot and it is humid and that kind of thing. And this year, when we went, there was actually some late rains, which meant that we had more mud than usual and a lot of ticks. So here's a little graphic that I created just showing our journey on that day. And we see everybody's fresh and clean setting off onto the journey, and you can see how Carmelita is so flat. This is one of the opening trails, And you can see it's probably quite wide. You can get an ATV along there if you want to. And this is, this is quite close to civilization, as it were. And this, you can see how the trail is cut up there. And just, I know, kind of like coming up, we'll see, kind of like this is some of that jungle mud that I was talking about. And this is just small little patches of mud. It makes me feel very, very grateful that I don't go when the whole trail is that like that. So one of the things that the guide was telling us about fairly quickly was these ticks. So, yes, I'm going back to the ticks again and just zooming in on them because what they do is they hang on the end of the leaves like that. And if you brush the foliage at the edge of the path, then you're going to find them on your trousers or on your legs or wherever you might find them. And it's amazing how quickly a single file column is formed, how everybody's going to stick to the middle of the path once they've seen where the ticks are. This is the first lunch stop. It's a place called El Guacate. And I just want to try and show you this because it's this really nicely equipped space to stop in. Now, it might look a bit rustic to you, but there's chairs and there's cover, and it really kind of like it's a nice place to stop. As you have your lunch, you then find you attract some attention, and this is the first place we saw a bunch of monkeys come in. This is a family of spider monkeys that came in. Now, they don't hassle you like monkeys in other countries. They don't come down and try and steal your food or anything like that. I think that they maybe wait and see if there's any leftovers later on after we've left the camp. But most of the time, they're just up in the trees watching us, and we're usually watching them. And this time, we even had one of their babies come and have a look at us as well, which I was particularly happy about. So I think it inspired one of our group to have a little play in the trees himself. Now, this fork is a fork in, the last day we'll be coming back from La Florida. So this is kind of like the fork that begins the loop. And now we're going to go off to El Tintal. And as we walk through this path, you see that this path is getting a bit smaller. This path is, kind of like more like most of what we're going to be walking on. El Tintal itself, the campsite there, it's been modernized a lot. And this, again, I feel is like our bridge in because we've got a concrete floor structure, we've got flushing toilets, we've got proper showers. Well, they're cold, but they're proper showers and that kind of thing. And this is, when I saw how they'd redeveloped this was very luxurious, I thought. Compared to the first time that I went there. And what you find at these sites, and hopefully that's advancing, is you always find these ocellated turkeys. Now, you may have seen these around Tikal as well if you've been there. You see them in the forest, you see them certainly around the Mayan sites, and these are just the most beautiful, beautiful birds. But also, for me, you really see the dinosaur there. This is this like blue skin and orange warts. This thing is a kind of magical and rather unusual creature. And in the times when I've been, you always get the males doing their dances, trying to impress the gaggle of females that are around them. Super, super interesting birds. Now, this particular time, we also uh, got greeted by a snake. And this little snake was eating a frog. It was a really interesting, beautiful snake, completely harmless, but kind of interesting. Now, this is our guide, Antonio, showing us the site of El Tintal. And, I just want to, again, it's wonderful going with these guys. They're so enthusiastic about their job, about showing you what is out in their neighborhood, showing you, kind of like what's out in their jungle. Really, really super great guys. They're very knowledgeable and so enthusiastic. And this is the site of El Tintal. Sorry, I stopped that a little bit late. It's a pre-classic site, had its heyday around about somewhere between 300 BC and 150 AD. It's the second biggest site in the Mirador Basin. It has a Sacbe'ob directly to El Mirador. Apparently, the first archaeologists visited in about the 1950s. Then there was investigations in the 70s and the 90s before in-depth investigations in 2004. There's about 9 square kilometers that have been mapped with about 850 structures up to 50 meters tall. But that site has been really heavily looted. There's over 2,000 looters' trenches all the way through it. And this is, something that we're going to find. It's not until you actually go out there and walk around. And beside the Sacbe'ob, you'll see these little mounds, which were post-classic settlements sometimes, and they've got so many trenches through them. They've just been everywhere's been looted. Um, so we went on our city tour. I don't have many photos from it simply because it's not very excavated. It's still a lot of it is undercover, so you can't really see a lot from photos. But this is our first sunset on top of the one of the tallest structures there. And honestly, sunset on top of a pyramid never gets old, I have to say. And one of the things, while you're sitting on the top there, there's monkeys, there's parrots flying around and toucans and that kind of thing. But one of the things that always strikes me as in a way the oddest thing is the number of dragonflies that you see. There's dragonflies just flying around your head the whole time up there. That was the end of our first day. So the second day is going to take us from El Tintal to El Mirador. And this is the first day that we're really going to walk on a Sacbe'ob. And actually, kind of like I'm going to split this in two and take us firstly from El Tintal to La Muerta, because La Muerta is like a little satellite site of El Mirador, which we're going to stop at on the way to go and have a look at. It's like our introduction. So here you can see again, this is a bit more of a proper walk. 16 miles, 6 hours, 43 minutes we were walking. It's kind of like we've broken into the walk now, and this is a Sacbe'ob. Now you can probably see this cleared area, and at the sides of this area, it's actually going to drop down to what would be the swampy lowlands. Now, this is an uncleared area of the same Sacbe'ob, but you see it's relatively flat, it's relatively straight. And so, kind of like you really know when you're walking on them, and especially from the way that they drop down. Now, they can be up to 35 meters wide, they can be up to 9 meters up from the jungle floor. And the reason why they're called Sacbe'ob means white road. And originally they were topped with limestone so that they could be navigated at night because they were literally white and you could move hundreds of thousands of people over these roads every day. So very important for moving that number of people, that huge population of that area around. This part obviously is a little bit more modern. This is what I like to call the threshold bridge. And for me, it's when I get to this bridge, this is when I know that I'm really there. This is when I know that, kind of like I am really passing into what I like to think of as the heart of the jungle. Now, interestingly enough, very soon after this, we end up at this little site, which is like a little Guardian site called El Jabali. Again, kind of like this is the developed area. I want to show you the developed areas before we go on to the less developed areas on days 5 and 6. And we stop for a bit of lunch here, and then we're greeted by the Coatis afterwards. This is If you haven't seen them, they're kind of like I think that the people sort of describe them as a bit like a jungle raccoon. They used to be really friendly. They used to follow you around at Tikal, but now that nobody feeds them, they're not quite so close. So here we're entering La Muerta, and the site is actually much bigger than this. This is just a little part of the site which has been maybe excavated and restored, and it's these two structures. And there's something for me. This is a classic period site, from what I understand. There's something really special about arriving here. This pyramid is, again, I can't explain it, but this is our first stop at the Mirador site. And this one is particularly interesting in that it has this dual level labyrinth, they call it, and you can actually get in under this pyramid, and that's what it looks like on the inside. This is apparently a burial chamber underground, from what I understand. Again, kind of like I only go by what I've been told, but this is, kind of like one of our first places to explore at Mirador. So as we continue to walk, we come across another strange structure in the jungle. You can see this metal structure with a polycarbonate roof, and it covers a geoglyph carved into the bedrock. And this geoglyph, I'm sorry, I don't have a whole lot of information there. I know that the glyph, or the glyph for the Kingdom of Can, as far as I understand, is there. And I guess this is the welcome to El Mirador population 100,000 kind of sign that you find as you're approaching the Mirador site itself. So just a short walk from there, we get to the Mirador campsite, and this is a bit more like it. This is a bit more like what we're going to be experiencing. You see, everything is temporary, everything has to be removable. And so what you have is black nylon sheeting strung over posts with these tents underneath it. There's, as you can see, you don't have the fly sheet over the tent because that would be horribly stuffy to sleep in. And as you can see, there's not much privacy there at all. We don't have that shower block anymore. It's now down to bucket showers and long drop latrines. So it is really kind of like going back to doing the expedition properly. And here we're climbing the El Tigre pyramid and get our first view of La Danta. So this is the pyramid La Danta. This is looking east at sunset. And, it's just such an impressive place to be. It can be very quiet up there. It's certainly nice to get up there after walking in the jungle all day because it's so much fresher. You can see the wind moving the leaves, and it's strange how there's no breeze down on the jungle floor, but once you get on top of the pyramid, it certainly freshens up a lot. And as I said, those sunsets over the jungle never get old. Still, the next morning takes us into our big day. And this was one of the photographs that I took this year. 4 a.m. start to get up there to photograph the Milky Way. And it's amazing how many people are very happy about making a 4 a.m. start, where most people would be rather reluctant about it. Once we know what we're doing, it's there's a bit more enthusiasm about it. And certainly, this is also one of the things, again, a big compliment to the guides, how when there's something different to do, when there's something interesting to do, the guides are okay, are we going to go and watch the stars again? Are we going to go and do this again? And so this was one of this year's pictures. This is actually just a single photograph. It was a 3-minute exposure, and I didn't quite get the light painting right on this one, I have to say. That was one of last year's one, which I like a bit better. But it's quite something lugging a tripod and camera and all of this gear up the pyramid at 4 a.m. to go and take these shots. But it's something which is a really important part of it for me. And unfortunately, this year, our whole objective to go and watch Venus rise, well, just before sunrise, this bank of clouds came in the east and obscured our view. So we didn't really get to see Venus on the horizon, that we'd come to see to do. But here is a little composite we put together, showing this is Venus, which I've kind of like, let's say, exaggerated the lighting on it. We could see that it's there, but that's where it was. And connecting it with that 12 Ahpu day in the Dresden Codex. Now, did we get it right? Did we not get it right? Well, the astronomy website that I was looking at was saying that the heliacal rise of Venus was going to occur on the 29th of March, actually. And so 28th of March seems to be right. And, when Venus is those first few days as the morning planet, Venus changes its altitude very, very rapidly. So maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I'd like to think that we probably got it right to go there on the 12 Ahpu day rather than the 8 Ahmach, 8 Gib day that would have been the previous day, which would have been available within the Dresden Codex to watch it rise. So I think we did it right in that way. But there were some things that I noticed with that rise. And here, they're going to do a little composite picture here. Because Venus was rising with the ecliptic and the sun would have been rising somewhere in the middle. And I noticed that Ledanta was really offset from the east because kind of like if Venus is up here, the sun would have been rising around about here. So this is certainly not aligned to the equinox sunrise or anything like that. It's very much offset. And so I, tried to create this kind of composite from stellarium. I don't think I got the scales quite as good as I could. We obviously didn't see the near new moon or Saturn rising, but where Ledanta is over here. And so I checked with my pocket compass, obviously not accurate surveying tools or anything like that, and found that it shows up at an angle of about 105 degrees, or an azimuth of 105 degrees. And this is, from what I understand, an angle that's found in a lot of Mayan sites, as it represents the sunrises on the 12th of February and 30th of October. And that between the 12th of February and the 30th of October, you get the 260-day count. And from what I understand, this represents the solar nadir, particularly at sort of about 14.8 degrees north where I live. So it's kind of interesting to see this recorded in that architecture from sort of like 2,200 years ago. So once we'd had our little astronomical phenomena of the morning, had our little astronomical tour, we went back to our campsite for breakfast before our tour of El Mirador began. So I'm going to walk you through that. And we're going to begin with a little walk through the campsite. Now, obviously, I sped it up just because, otherwise it get a little bit boring walking through, but just to give you an idea of that rustic nature of the campsite. And you really need your wits about you when you're walking around at night with all the tree roots that are around there. So Mirador itself is this great site, at its height between 400 and 200 BC. And this is just a signboard. All of these are the sponsors of the excavations there. There's a great site map and all sorts of information that we go there. And we're going to begin our tour on the Cascabel and Leon groups at El Mirador. And it's just amazing how big these places are. Now, Mirador is really rather let's say, well excavated. It's well restored compared to many of the places that we're going to go. And just, just to see the scale of these places, it just blows my mind every time. I was particularly interested to see the size of the limestone blocks that were in the base, rather than the blocks which were higher up. Seeing the larger blocks occupying the lower and older position rather than the upper position. So that's what we see there. And around the site, you'll also find various stelae. Now, they're not quite the stelae that we'll see in kind of like some of the other sites. You've seen ones from Tikal or some of the classic era sites. This one apparently shows some graffiti from some Teotihuacanos that came through, put a Tlaloc emblem on there. This one is a really interesting one. And I will try to recall what I've been told about it. So this here apparently is the beak of the principal bird deity, and the principal bird deity is holding a serpent, and apparently from the mouth of the serpent there are drops of venom which are being collected in a bowl beneath. Now, this gets onto another one of the things which I find really interesting around those pre-classic sites, which is how the principal bird deity, there's a lot of carving that seems to be dedicated to it. And it always interests me because, from what I've seen, what I've read, what I understand, in the Popol Vuh, the principal bird deity is, kind of like Kakish and this kind of thing. And this is what the guides are telling me. And it's like, well, hang on, this seems strange that this is supposed to be, kind of like like, how can I put it, like the bad guy in the Popol Vuh. There's a lot of carving that seems to be dedicated to him. And it makes me wonder about a kind of like almost like a change of religion between the pre-classic era and the classic era. And unfortunately, I've never had the time to kind of like look further into it. But anyway, I just kind of think it's rather interesting. We see there's hidden messages in there. I don't know whether this is old or recent or whatever, but there's these hidden glyphs that only show up when you put your light in the right place, etched into those stelae. This is apparently some like kind of like governor's kind of like palace kind of thing. And the thing that really interested me here is this carving. Now, what you see here, this design which is here, which is an emulation of the weave of a petate which is a reed mat, and the reed mat which is what the nobles would be sitting on. And so this was the place of Achpop, the Achpop being the king. And so, kind of like, so this is this raised stone structure that's actually got the pop carved into it. And also, kind of like, it's interesting, like taking it back to the names of the Harb calendar and seeing that the first month is called Pop because this is the seating of, kind of like the king, as it were, the seating of the governor, and that being the seating of the governor of the particular solar year. So it was interesting to see that design, being shown there. Now, this is walking through the Grand Necropolis at El Mirador. And it's huge. It's phenomenal. It's just incredible, the number of structures, the number of whether they were palaces or whatever they were. This is just this huge, highly sophisticated city center place. And just, again, giving you the scale of the place is incredible to see just how many buildings, what an urban center that place was. This is possibly um, the jewel in the crown of Tikal, of El Mirador. This is the Hero Twins frieze, which I'm sure that many of you have seen before. And for me, this is amazing every time that I go and see it. Um, you have this was supposedly a structure that had water flowing through this lower level, the lower level which I have never seen in my journeys to the site. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. But you have the top level, which is the sky band, and here you have a pelican. And the interesting thing is that that pelican is actually feeding the fish in the way that a bird would be, feeding a baby bird. Its mouth is most definitely, or its beak is most definitely within the mouth of the fish. So it's definitely feeding it rather than eating it. Here you have, I've been told, Kinichahau in his bird plumage, again representing the principal bird deity. Here, these have been described to be as butterfly motifs. And then down here, you have the hero twins swimming through Xibalba after their victory over the lords of the underworld. Now, we'll come to that in a moment. Beneath, there is a section that I have never seen. In my 6 journeys there, in the last 9 years, I've never been allowed, or kind of like it's understudy or whatever it is at the moment, so we've never seen it. The interesting thing was, and I don't know if this is known, but funnily enough, if you walk down the arrivals tunnel at Guatemala City at the moment, there is an exhibition of photography there where you can see the whole of this. So I've never seen it in real life, but I actually saw it when we got back to the airport following the trek. So what we see here, hopefully that's moving. So this is the hero twins. And what we see here is Hunahpu, here is Ishbalamkir, and here is the head of Hunahpu. And I'm sure that, kind of like there's what I understand about it, or what I see about it, is that this is the raising of the new sun, and maybe this makes Hunahpu the morning star and Ishbalamkech the evening star, and this being the morning star bringing the sun, which is literally what we've been watching that morning. So, kind of like just made it even more impressive. So from there, that's not the, obviously the whole place is impressive. And this is the Jaguar Claw Temple. You'll see that you've got a temple, and on either side of the stairway, we have these 2 huge jaguar masks. And these are jaguar faces that are kind of like emerging with the claws to each side. The western side one is partly like a jaguar skull because it's representing the dead, is what I've been told. And what you'll find in there is that in some of the places you've still got the original stucco with the reds and blacks on it. So it's just amazing to be able to see these things and kind of what a job that's been done. So once we'd had our tour of the city, we went back and we had some lunch. Then we made our fire ceremony because for me it's always important to take some offerings to the site to go and nourish the altars at the sites because that's what we're supposed to do. And then we walked out to La Danta. Now, rather like the site at El Tintal, trying to take photographs of La Danta that have any meaningful value gets very difficult. It is so big. It's very, very difficult to get anything that is just like, kind of like that shows you anything. This is the entrance up onto the first platform. That platform is 400 meters wide and 600 meters long, if I've got that right. This is one of the largest structures that humans have ever created. It is huge. And it's so huge that you don't even kind of like realize, we're still on a human made structure, on an ancient Mayan structure. And you're going up these steps onto a platform and then up another set of steps onto another platform before, kind of like onto the pyramids themselves. Now, this is just before climbing up onto the final kind of like pyramid. The final pyramid is over here on the right. This is one of the, I don't know, secondary structures. I'm standing on the third one. And what we see here between this structure and this structure and this structure is the triangle that is talked about as being the connection to the hearthstones of creation, the stars Saiph, Alitak, and Rigel in the constellation of Orion. And so this is kind of like the summit core before we go up onto the kind of like the ultimate pyramid, as it were. And then that's what we see here. So this is sunset at Ledanta. And we can see over in the distance, this is El Tigre. This is where we were for the sunrise in the morning. Now, this sunset, I said that this was on the 28th of March. So this is 1 week after the spring equinox. And that sunset, I think it should be about 3 degrees to the north of west, if I remember rightly. And what we see here is that El Tigre is offset at a position of 285 degrees, which is sunset on the 13th of August and the 30th of April, which again are the solar zenith transits. This 260-day count again being shown in the architecture. So again, kind of like, please, if this is the what I understand from it. I'm hoping that, kind of like, I'm hoping to learn more about it. But it's so interesting to see those numbers encoded into the architecture of the site. So day 4, we start our hike to Nakbe. And once again, we're going to be walking on the Sacbe'ob. This is, I think, one of the times we did it, when we did it with some people from Scotland, and we called it a wee bimble. Just a wee bimble to Nakbe it was. 8.5 miles walk, same kind of temperature, following the Sacbe'ob to Nakbe. And, kind of like, for me, Nakbe is very, very special. I think that part of the special nature of Nakbe is that reading kind of like in the visitors' books, it seems that there's, about 3,000 people per year that go to El Mirador, but only about 300 per year that make it all the way to Nakbe. And so there's something a bit more pristine about it. Now, interestingly enough, apparently Nakbe was discovered in 1930 by an aviator from the University of Pennsylvania called Percy Madeira. And it was excavated in 1960, or in 1960s, the 80s, and the 90s. And Dr. Richard Hansen made a project there to investigate the limestone quarries, because that's, kind of like where the blocks came from to make the pyramids. So it's really interesting to see that. And that it was found that they would be using flint tools to cut the limestone. There was also evidence of shells there, which showed long distance trade between the cities. So Nakbe apparently had its origins around about 1400 BC. It's a really old site. And what I'd say is kind of like the really large stuff really was made around about 300 BC, from what I understand. There's 3 groups: an East group, a West group, and the Codex group. The Codex group was made that's a later occupation during the Classic period. Each of those areas is connected by a Sacbe'ob, and they are each of those was connected by a Sacbe'ob. Now, this is the Codex group, so this is a Classic period group, and this the occupation at that time was apparently quite famous, or kind of like known for its pottery. There was a lot of pottery found there, and apparently, I believe, from what I understand, the Princeton vase came from this area from about that time, and so there's some of the bits of pottery that they've found around the site. So another thing that amazes me as we walk in these places, and particularly Nakbe, is, this is what we're walking around. Now, why does it amaze me? We're walking between what I understand to be one of the large astronomical complex through to a structure called Structure 59, which was a 31-meter tall, that's a 101-foot tall temple. And what do you see there? You see this kind of like undulating ground. And I think, kind of like this is obviously the skill and the eye of the archaeologists and the people that realize that this is a site, this is, obviously not natural structures, because honestly, looking around there, you wouldn't, or I wouldn't necessarily know that it wasn't just, kind of like the way that it was. This is one of the limestone quarries, and you can see in this the limestone blocks. Obviously they're unfinished; they were left in place for whatever reason it might have been, not cut and taken to do whatever it was that they were going to build with them. So the biggest structure there. Sorry, that's moving. The largest structure. This is one of my favorite pictures that we took. This is two of the guys pointing out Ladanta on the horizon there. And this is the summit of the structure one at Nakbe, just to give not only an understanding of how big that structure is, but also an understanding of where we are. Seeing, it's just trees for as far as you can see. I often think that it kind of looks like the sea or something like that. There, I think that this over here, I think this is Ladanta in the distance. And, it's kind of like seas and islands, or a big sea with islands in it. So, just to give you the understanding of the scale of the place that we're walking through, and, kind of, I have to admit, even seeing it now, it just never ceases to take my breath away. The interesting thing, kind of like from just about here as well, is that you can also see this is the summit core of the principal structure at Nakbe. And again, there's two little structures here. There's a structure here. Again, we've got that triadic group of structures, rather like the stars of the constellation of Orion. So going up at sunset also means you might be coming down in the dark. And this is the reality of coming down from a less, let's say, touristic site. That these places, these steps are very loose. I mean, they serve their purpose, but kind of like we've been hiking all day, we're sweaty, we're kind of like dirty and all that kind of thing. And it's quite a mission to be coming back down with your little head torch. And Nakbe has a really special property about it. Now, I'm just going to stop this here because before I show you the next bit, and if we have got any arachnophobes watching tonight, you might choose to look away at this point in time. Because there was a couple of years ago, one of the people that came with me was, they said to me, how are the spiders there? And I said, quite honestly, that in my time, in my journeys there, I had very rarely seen spiders, but I had seen a 3-inch tarantula that was about 4 meters down a hole at El Mirador. And that was kind of my experience with the spiders. Some people have told me that they feel that Nakbe has a dark energy. I would say that Nakbe has a strong energy. And that energy tends to amplify and reflect whatever you might take in there that you might need to deal with. And for the one time, as we were walking through to the campsite, the one person who really had the issue with the spiders, well, this Where is it? I thought it would be coming by now. That walked out in front of her. That was about as big as my hand. It's the only time I've seen one, before or after. And as you can imagine, that was, it's pretty like traumatic event. And so, like I say, Nakbe does have this very strong energy that brings that up, and maybe may need to take a few more cigars for the duendes to keep in balance over there. So day 5 takes us from Nakbe to La Florida, and on the way we're going to stop at Wakna. So Wakna is I think is actually quite a large site, but it's virtually unexcavated apart from this tomb, which was looted. And so we're going to stop here on the way. And apparently, Wakna had this very, very large astronomical complex. And so I've heard this called a royal tomb. I've also heard that maybe it's an astronomer's tomb. And so here we are. This is this big day. 33 and a half, 34 kilometers, 8 hours and 47 minutes of walking. I think that might be a bit ambitious as well. And it was very, very, very tough. We see there's all these little sites around. You recognize El Jabali, El Tintal, that's where we've been before. And this I wanted to keep in there because this is a hikara or calabash. And so again, going with the Hunahpu theme that I'd wanted to bring in with the rising of Venus, in the Popol Vuh, Hunahpu's head is put into a calabash tree known as Tsima. And it's just before we get to Wakna, we stop at a little swamp with a little camp beside it called El Guiro. And that's where we find this calabash tree. Now, obviously, the path's going out here. I mean, well, this is where you really realize that, kind of like how important the guides are, because I don't think you'd necessarily find your way round on your own. And you look how close the foliage is. Remember those ticks? And so, kind of like we're finding our way through this, very narrow paths to get out to Wakna, which is part of its protection, I guess. Until finally, there's no fencing here. There's not a lot here at all. That's why we can't, stay overnight here. We couldn't just stop there. And we find this one sign. That's like literally the only thing that tells you, yes, you're in the right place. And that's what we're looking for. And so now, kind of like I want to show you, I took my GoPro and like decided to do a little bit of filming in there to show you a little bit about what it's like there. And as you can see, this is obviously not an official excavation. And as we're going in there, you see that there were some bats flying around and that kind of thing. We're really just in the middle of nowhere. And you see this entrance, which is showing this pentagonal form, this very, kind of clear supporting structure that you'd see in those kind of, I guess, those kind of tombs, those kind of structures. And what really gets me is just how pristine this plaster seems, this stucco that's on there. This tomb, from what I understand, is around about 2,200 years old. It comes from about 200 BC or something like that. And the plaster looks like it could have been put on, kind of like 5 years ago. It's just amazing to see. And it's so smooth. It's so well done. Now, obviously, the looters have been in there and cut their way in around there. I heard there was about 25 pounds of jade taken out of there. And this is a second structure at the site. You see, kind of like really to get in there, you're climbing through this dust. And it's very, I can't imagine what it would be like to be one of these people that are really kind of like excavating this. This is dirty, hot, sweaty work, just getting in there with a camera. So you can hardly imagine what it must be like to get in, to be, actually working in those conditions. But again, seeing the smoothness of this plaster, and we're going to go inside this one. Um, there's nothing I was going to say there's like nothing inside of them now, obviously. I don't know what goes down further into that. I mean, I'm obviously not going to go back down into that. But this is kind of like one of the insides of the chamber. You just see this smooth white plaster. And again, what intrigues me is the smoothness of the plaster, but also you can see the draw marks where the plasterer, this ancient plasterer has made this wall. And that connection with the essence of the plasterer, seeing somebody's work from that time in that way. So for me, this is always quite a magical place to be. I mentioned earlier about remember the lunch stops. Well, this is our lunch stop after Wakna. There's no shade, there's nothing to sit on. There's maybe if you're lucky, you find a decent sized rock to sit on while you share whatever it is that you got to share. And these are our mules. This is our mule train that was our support, taking our backpacks and taking our food and taking our cooks between the camps. And it's really going back to that pioneering exploration spirit of trekking in the jungle with a mule train. It's like, it's just such a great adventure. So here's, kind of like that's how our cook was getting around. She was riding on that one. And then finally, we get to La Florida. And I have to say, after that 34 kilometers, this sign again carries a very emotional charge because finally we made it, kind of like it's time when we know that we're in the place where we're going to spend the night. So then we come to our final day. Day 6 from La Florida to Carmelita and then Carmelita to Flores. It's just a short walk, but there's no way that you could do that after the walk from Nakbe. It's just way too far. And so we just saved this small kind of like 3 hour walk for the last day. And it's returning to that, kind of like going back into civilization after our retreat and after moving around and all this kind of thing. Just over 3 hours to get there. What's that, about 6, 7 miles, something like that. Now there's a saber tree there, which there's probably some other ones around, but this one is really well marked. And you see our friend Arturo there, he's about 6 foot tall. And you see just how big that saber is. Apparently that's quite a small one. I think only about 150 years old. There's one at Tintal on the way in that you'll see, which is much, much bigger. And this is the Mayan tree of life. This is the national tree of Guatemala. Now, La Florida, from what I understand, was a chert or flint works from the classic era. And what we have here is one of the residences. And this is, kind of like, again, it looks really well restored, or, kind of like maybe it was found in good condition. And I always think it's interesting because, in a society where flint or chert was used for weaponry, for arrowheads, for spearheads, for war clubs, and that kind of thing, whoever controls the flint mine is going to control the supply of weapons. And so this must have been a really strategically important site. And this little place is this like my shoulder width. I'm not a particularly big guy, and this is like my shoulder width going through it. So you see it's really tight getting through there. It's a particularly impressive structure. As one of the few pictures of me in the presentation. This, you remember I was talking about the bridges? Well, this is the second threshold bridge. This is going back out into civilization, as it were. And as we cross this bridge, I was born in 71, and kind of like I grew up in the 80s with video games and that kind of thing. And I think about these games like Tomb Raider going across the bridge with the rotting planks that fall away, and this is literally that bridge that's taking us out from the world of the temples and out from the world of the excavations back out into the modern world once more. And a little way along the trail, we see it open out into this fern forest. I always think it sounds like something from Jurassic Park or something like that. But obviously, we're getting closer to Carmelita as the trail opens up here. And then finally, we emerge back onto the airfield again, back out to Carmelita. But of course, our time is not done. And after a quick stop for a little spot of lunch and maybe a cold beer, we jump into the truck and start our journey down to Flores. This dirt road seems to go on forever when you're going down there. And it's kind of like weird waking up in the jungle and then getting into a truck and then finishing our day back in Flores amongst this noise and hustle and bustle of the modern world again. And that takes us back into now. And so, yes, I will be going back again next year in March for another 6 day trek. You can't keep me away. So I hope that you've enjoyed that presentation, and I hope that that inspires you to go and try that journey yourself. Because, as I said, for me, um, you don't need to be massively fit, but it's one of the most inspiring things that I think we can do. So, thank you so much for being here. Thank you. I hope that you've enjoyed the presentation. And yeah, if anybody's got any questions, and thank you for all your lovely happy birthday wishes and all that kind of thing. This, I have to say, has been one of the most awesome ways that I could spend the evening of my birthday. Thank you all for coming to my party.
Thank you, Mark. My audio was off. Uh, we do have some questions here and a lot of birthday wishes. So let's see. The first one is what precautions were taken to reduce the effect of tick exposure?
Well, most people had a good spray. It's been something that I have been experimenting with myself. I kind of always want to experiment with myself to work out ways um, that I can deal with them. I used to use a product called Herbal Armor, which I really wanted to work because it was nice and natural. But unfortunately, I think the ticks just sniffed that, went, a new brand, and like then ended up all over me. And so kind of like ended up with, kind of like something chemical until this year, until I found, I'm not going to necessarily name the brand because that would be probably not right. But there's actually, I used these clothes that were impregnated with permethrin, I think it's called. And this was the first year that I only had one bite, and that was on part of my arm that wasn't covered. And so, like anybody that wants to know, kind of like this is just the most amazing thing. And it's like to not be covered in itchy, sweaty bites when you're walking around transforms that journey no end. And so I'm a big, let's say, fan of this particular clothing now.
Yeah, when I lived in Belize, one thing is a man is not dressed without his machete. I learned that.
Hmm.
But know, you couldn't walk down a little trail through a field without getting ticks on you, and that was your thing to do when you got back to your camp. I lived in a two-room tent, but when you got back to your place, you really had to check yourself good. And then again, when you were bathing in the river, the next day you'd check yourself again. But I
Absolutely.
never got any diseases or anything like that. Isabel commented at one point, uh, their song is amazing, like a drum with so much resonance. Well, did you mention the howler monkeys? Or
That would have been the
The
ocellated
turkey.
turkeys.
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
wow.
And you hear them whoop, 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 whoop. And like the males, when they get down and they're doing their thing with their like with their tail feathers and this kind of thing, they're really so impressive. They're just wonderful, wonderful birds to watch. And I mean, like all of these things, I could sit for hours just watching the monkeys. But like the turkeys as well, it's incredible. And I know it's kind of like you see them everywhere. It's like they're so common, but they're just so beautiful. Those colors that they have are just incredible. And I never feel that I can do justice to them with the photographs that I take.
Yeah, they are really something. And about the turkeys, I feed the Egyptian geese every day, and there's one especially that's so bold. Yeah, she'll come right up to me and take it out of my fingers. Um, um, well, Joey said he did the hell out of the trip to Mirador last year, and it was magical, and he wants to do it again next year. And what are some packing essentials that you would recommend? And do you bring an extra change of clothes or not to save on the weight?
Yeah, I mean, basically because the backpacks are going to go on the mules. So obviously you don't want to overstress or like overpack things, but I always take an extra pair of trousers. Um, for me, kind of like long-legged, tight-fitting kind of like underwear, so kind of like you don't get the rub from the seams. A change of socks for every day, I feel is really important, and I like to be fresh every day. Although again, the same like clothing company, I got like some really, really good stuff from them. Head torch, I think it's important, especially when you go into that labyrinth under La Muerte. You need a head torch to go in there. Um, and I also tend to take a sleeping bag liner with a that's also treated. Again to not get bitten in the night and that kind of thing. Those have been like those things have been what have really revolutionized it for me. But in general, I think the other thing that's really important is footwear, but to realize that you don't take big leather boots. You don't take boots at all. You take things which are lightweight because you've got a long time walking. And so you want something like trail runners or something like that, perfectly good enough. If you're not going in the mud, you want as light as possible on your feet and, kind of like something, kind of like a good, adventure brand, let's say, but definitely not leather. Nothing too hot.
That's some good advice. So there's a discussion here about the Milky Way. That was an excellent photo you had there. Um,
Thank you.
let's see. The K Graph asks, is the Milky Way the feather serpent? But at another point, Claudia says the Milky Way is the cosmic Sacbe'ob. And then Alex Krim, he said, at least in the iconography of the classic period, the Milky Way is thought to be represented as the starry deer crocodile. I would agree that it is the cosmic Sacbe'ob, and that is the route that souls take once there is a passing. Supposedly, their souls start uh, when you can see the Southern Cross and comes all the way up to the conjunction of the Milky Way with the ecliptic, where all the moon and the sun and all the planets pass. But yes, it's always been known as the white road of souls.
And it's something when you get out into that place because there in astronomy or astrophotography, there is a scale called the Bortle scale, which is basically how dark the sky is. And I mean, right now I'm in Philadelphia, which is a Bortle 9. I mean, the sky is basically orange. You can see the moon, you can see kind of like, Jupiter or something like that, but you can't see a lot else.
Right.
And at Mirador, it's Bortle 1. And this is the, kind of like you go up on top of the El Tigre in the morning and you look up. And I've had people say, is that a cloud? It's like, no, that's not a cloud, that's the Milky Way. This is just this beautiful white streak of, or like, kind of like light streak above us. It's
Right.
just so present. And that's, kind of like something special to take people out, especially if this is something that, when they've not necessarily been out under that before. To go and see the Milky Way like that for the first time is amazing.
Yeah. I remember years ago I was with a lady friend and we were the guests of the Barbachano family that uh, used to own the land that Chichen Itza's on, but they had a place on the beach over in Chicxulub, which was the little village named after where the asteroid hit there. But we were out on the beach at night, and there were so many stars that we could not identify anything. And we thought that we were the first people to notice that the Earth was shifting on its axis because we could not recognize anything. But we had two different beautiful meteorites coming through, and one came down and burst into different parts and was blue and green and just beautiful. Did you have any meteorite views out there?
Not at that point in time. No. Unfortunately, the only thing that you do get is satellites. Kind of like there's more and more satellites getting up there, and it's difficult to get a picture of the Milky Way without a satellite in it anymore. But I haven't seen meteorites there. Maybe I'm not exactly hitting one of the peaks of any of the particular
Right.
meteor showers.
Yeah.
That's not something I've tried. But saying that, that's an idea for another journey up there.
Here's an interesting question from Nicola. What did you learn about the reasons, motivations of the people with you to embark on such a journey?
So about each of the people that was coming with me, you
Yeah,
mean?
why were they motivated to take that trip with you?
Most of the time, I think, well, the ones that came with me, I think that part of it was because of I would like to, kind of like say that I don't think I mean, I'm obviously not an expert in anything, but I know a bit of stuff about a lot of stuff. And that's kind of actually quite what I like to do. And so there's a bit about the astronomy and a bit about the history and a bit about the like the spiritual part. It's kind of like just all of those things brought together. And I think that part of it as well, I just well, hopefully it's come over in this. I just light up when I start talking about it. It's just been my passion for so long. I love that journey so much, and I think that that generally means people want to come and like experience that as well.
All right. Let's see, there's a couple messages from Dr. Nicholas Helmet, but they were just to me, so I'm gonna
Can
open.
I talk about it?
Oh, sure, go ahead,
Yeah.
Nicholas.
Yeah, I enjoyed your presentation. I've walked El Mirador 3 times back in the 1980s and 1990s, and we had 30 mules with us to carry the ice to keep our beer cold. And halfway up there, we would bury the ice because you can't take it all the way up and all the way back. You have to bury it halfway. Um, I haven't been drinking for the last 10 years, but that's what I did before. But anyway, the butterflies you talked about, that's a deity called the shell-winged dragon. And
Thank you.
that's in my PhD dissertation. I had a whole chapter on that. And my PhD dissertation is online. You can download it at no cost.
Thank you. That sounds great.
And then there were some other things which I've now lost track of. Jim, what was my last message?
Oh gosh. Let me look.
I was so focused on the show Winged Dragon. And another thing you can see, we used to see when we walked there were miniature orchids. When you walk through the Bajos, you see tiny, tiny little orchids. The flower is only a couple of, not even a centimeter in size.
The other thing was the principal bird deity. And
Oh, yeah. The principal bird deity was another chapter in my PhD dissertation. And that's it's called the laughing falcon, but the same name is it's a snake-eating hawk. So some people call it a hawk, some people call it a falcon. But all of that is in my PhD dissertation.
Wonderful. That's something I'm going to have to look for then.
Yeah. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Is there a particular link that I should go to, or is it on EDU
Yes,
or something
go
like
to
that?
maya-archaeology.org.
Okay,
maya-archaeology.org. And on the home page, my PhD should be there. There's a German
wonderful.
edition with 727 illustrations and an English edition that doesn't have
That's
photographs. So the
great.
German edition has all the photographs.
was your dissertation on the tomb?
Surface of the underwater world.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So, Mark, I don't know about if you'll know about any Teotihuacan influence, but Isabel says curious that the eagle eating the snake is on the Mexican flag, and curious about what's the relationship might be with Teotihuacan influence.
Well, I mean, again, kind of like going by what I've heard from the guides and understand about the site, um, you know, and particularly kind of like going around the other sites, of course, you get Siak coming through in what 378 AD, and the Teotihuacan influence Tikal from even earlier than that. But they often talk about like Teotihuacan raids at Mirador. And I don't know that that bird with the snake was necessarily connected with that. As I say, I'm not an expert. I've not done the research on that kind of thing. But the one of the interesting things was they were saying there was this late period raid or something like that, and they worked out that it was Teotihuacan that had raided El Mirador because the skeletons had got green obsidian points, and the green obsidian came from Teotihuacan. And the again, kind of like I'm never sure how accurate some of the information that I've received is. That some of the graffiti came from Teotihuacan when they came back in retribution for a raid where people from Mirador went to go and steal some of that green obsidian from Teotihuacan. So I like I say, it would be something where, well, it's one of those things that's like a life's research just on one aspect of one site and trying to find the time to read all the things. You want that matrix download in the back of your head, really, don't you? But like, yeah, so I don't know about that connection.
For anyone reading the chat, Susan Hoffman has a rather involved comment about the active ingredients and for the tick and mite medicine. But Eric Christensen, and he's tuning in from New Zealand. He says, Mark, thank you very much. It was a great presentation, and it was great to relive it. He goes, I've done the walk 4 times and enjoyed it every time. He also used Permatrin every time. Incidentally, when he went last time in 2023, Antonio was also his guide. Thank you, Eric, for that. Now, Jesus is asking, are there burials found at El Mirador? And I'd like to say, I've been in contact with Richard Hansen and asked him this many times. They haven't found any royal burials, but they are finding burials in the other sites in the Mirador Basin. So I asked him, do you think at El Mirador they were using like bone houses where they would honor the deceased important people by just saving their bones? But he goes, no, we haven't found that either. And that would have come later on, that he doesn't think there's bone houses at El Mirador. So they might just not have had the same big to do when somebody passed. They might have been still burying them under the kitchen, or something like that. They haven't found any royal burials like that we would be used to thinking about. And Jesus is also asking, did the ancient people at Mirador practice any kind of agriculture? Of course they did. Yeah. Do you have any comment on agriculture at El Mirador?
I mean, I have to say, it always is interesting to me that to build such a huge and complex society in what I consider to be such an inhospitable place. When you're walking around there and how challenging it is to move around, and how they developed the system of the Sacbe'ob to move around between the cities and the infrastructure they created. And you think to yourself, and the same with Tikal not having a water source. What city do you find in most of the Western world that's not on a river or a lake or something like that? Water is the principal thing. And so when you look at it from that point of view, there must have been something really, really important that would make them choose to do a thing like that. And it was using this, from what I understand, the highly fertile mud from the swamps in order to grow the corn, and that, kind of like the amount of growth that they could get through the system of farming that they created there by dredging this mud up from the swamps each time, and the nutrients that it provided. So, you can't have a massive city like that without massive agriculture going on as well.
All right. Ed and Bryna from Chicago, were the trails you were on all former ancient Sacbe's?
Not all of them. The first day was, certainly there were just kind of like mixed trails. Sometimes you'd be kind of like going on a little bit of Sac Bay and then going on a detour because there's a lot of trees that have grown up through them. But certainly from Tintal to Mirador was pretty much all Sac Bay, and from Mirador to Nakbe was all Sac Bay. And so, kind of like as I showed, the flatness of them and the width of them, you can really see when you're on them. And I think kind of like some of my favorite ones, kind of like for a very accessible version, Yashha has some beautiful causeways there where you really see, I mean, it's a flat surface, curbstones, and then drops right off to the swamps on the side. I mean, obviously they're at Tikal as well, but these are the raw ones that have been reclaimed by the jungle, so they're a bit different.
All right. And then there's a discussion going on about, can you see Calakmul from El Mirador? And Adriano says, not so easy in that direction, but from Calakmul to El Mirador, yes. Laranta and El Mirador is easy to recognize thanks to a tree on the top. And Joe Gunn, he says, yes, from the tops of structures 1 and 2 at Calakmul, you can see El Mirador. And Rahima says they've been to Calakmul and have seen El Mirador from the top of the structures. Let's see. And Jay, thanks you. Oh, he went with you there or sent him there in 2022. Jay McAlvary. He can't agree more how important and impressive it is to have all the sunrises and sunsets from above the green sea with the monkeys and dragonflies. He'll mention that during my entry into El Dante, there was a skirmish between howlers and spider monkey families, unreal jungle sounds, and that moment in life was a highlight. John, did you
Yeah,
say
but
anything?
that's also kind of like where you get the 4 a.m. wake up on a regular basis. I mean, whether you want to be awake or not is really down to the howler monkeys, which come into the trees above your tent. And, kind of like once they start, that's it, you're awake. So you might as well get up and go and watch the stars, right? And I would say, they often talk about how when you're standing on top of either La Danta or El Tigre, how you can see Nakbe, you can see Nachtun, you can see El Tintal, and they're like, and over there is Calakmul, which if it's really clear, you can see. But I think one of the comments that it's really difficult to see Calakmul from El Mirador. I don't think I've ever seen it from there, just simply because there's always a bit of haze and it's not that easy to distinguish.
Yeah, and there's a lot of trees, so you might not see a temple rising up from that far away above tree level, even though it might be. Everybody's thanking you for a great presentation. Um, Kristen loved learning about the duendes and the chicle. And now that Michelle asked, now that you've walked along this road system several times, what insights have you gained about the ancient peoples who also walked along these roads?
I think the biggest thing is just that every time that I walk it, I just feel more and more impressed with the level of understanding and technology that these people were creating kind of like 2000 years ago. It's just, to see, um, I don't know exactly how to put it, how we kind of have this, however it is with regards to pinnacles of society and that kind of thing, seeing what the ancient Maya people were doing. And I particularly enjoy kind of like the pre-classic period and seeing kind of like what was going on in Europe at that time and what they were doing and how advanced that civilization was. It just it never stops being interesting, and you're always learning something new each time that you go. You go and see new animals, you go and see new structures, something that you didn't see before. And that's what keeps me going back. I mean, people sort of say it's a once in a lifetime trek, and I mean, I could almost go back if my legs would let me, I'd go back every month, if you know what I mean. But you definitely need a bit of a recovery afterwards. And I love the idea about taking the ice for the mules. One of the things that I didn't show was the shultun, which are these basically ancient Mayan fridges, which is a hole in the ground, a hole in the limestone where they would keep things and that kind of thing, with a top that's going to go on. So I don't know if that's what you use to store the ice for the beer in, but obviously, kind of maybe that would have been a rather useful thing.
Yeah, one time I was on a horseback again, invitation of the Barbachano family there in Chichen Itza, but they had arranged a horseback tour back through Old Chichen, and I think I think it's called the Colorado Complex, and there's a big Chaltun there. And we happened to walk upon the scene of where French archaeologist lady was coordinating the efforts for the Maya to build a little tripod structure and a rope to lower them down so they could see the bottom of the. And I mentioned I was from the Institute of Maya Studies, and she goes, "Well, come here. You want to go down?" So the Maya men lowered me down, and it was the most beautiful giant thing. It wasn't just a hole in the ground. It was a really big, like maybe 20-foot high uh, rum bottle shaped chaltoon that you had a small opening and then it opened up into a bigger place, but with plastered walls. Excellent, excellent. I don't know that I've seen. See it? Answer your phone, Sam. Sam, I'm gonna mute. That's so funny. Um, and one of the last questions here is Marjorie asking, what is the significance of the Orion star pyramid alignment?
Well, I think this is your specialist area, isn't it, Jim?
Yes, Margie, you send me your email and I can send you a link to my Zoom about this very event. um, I'm not sure, but you didn't mention Orion during your program, did you?
Yeah, twice. Like both at the top of La Danta and at the top of the principal structure at Nakbe, you can see those triadic structures. And one of the things, I had come across this theory many times, but it like at the on the signboard at the entrance to where you're going into the archaeological site at El Mirador, there's actually this kind of thing showing the Orion constellation with the triangle highlighted with the three hearthstones and the smoky fire in the middle.
Right.
Um, and so, kind of like to see it really, presented in public, as it were, in that way
Uh-huh.
really makes you take note. And it's so interesting to see that this is repeated again and again in these structures, which are, kind of like from what, 300 BC and that kind of thing. They're very early structures. And there was a documentary made several years ago called Mayan Blue or Atlantida Maya in about the city which is under Lake Atitlan or the site which is under Lake Atitlan. And one of the other things that they also kind of connected it with was the three volcanoes at Atitlan as this triadic structure representing that. So for both of those reasons, whether it's a connection with Orion or whether it's a connection with the volcanoes of Atitlan, it always piques my interest when I kind of like start seeing the triadic structures.
Right.
And I had one person that was suggesting that those shells that I was talking about at Nakbe, well, I don't know whether it's actually those shells, but that products from the Pacific would be taken to the Maya lowlands via Lake Atitlan, because whenever you're going on a journey, you need water. And so you would go from the Pacific coast up to San Lucas Toliman, go across to Samabach, as it's called now, make your offerings there, and then go across to Tsununa, where you've got the lowest outfall from the caldera to go back down to the lowlands. And so if Samabach went under around about 2000 years ago, and these sites were being developed, kind of like in the similar kind of era, it made me wonder whether it is a reference back to the three volcanoes of Atitlan
Mm-hmm.
because of the widths, the mountain, the pyramid being kind of like the replication of those volcanoes as well. So um, like I say, I love both examples, whether it's the Orion constellation or whether it's the volcanoes of Atitlan. Equally, it's really interesting that they chose those triadic structures.
There's also three volcanoes around Antigua where you have Agua, you have Fuego, and you have Pacaya. But Margie, I feel like even by your question, you kind of know that the Orion star triangle alignment is the main creation center of the Maya with the three Hearthstone formations that Mark mentioned, and then the fire in the middle. And from Guatemala, at times, well, I lived there for 7 years, but at times you could actually visually see the redness of the N42, 43 nebula, the fire in the middle of the hearth. So 2,000 years ago, this would have been a very prominent uh, aspect in the sky, and the reason why it was so important in their creation myth. But I mean, that's where the corn god was carried, and he reemerges from the turtle shell. I mean, the whole thing going on there. You have the dueling peccaries, Gemini right there. They're the ancestral grandparents. You have so much going on, and that's very near the crossroads of the ecliptic and the Milky Way as you're looking out of the galaxy. The 2012 thing with the alignment on the winter solstice was as you're looking towards the center of the Milky Way galaxy. So when you see Orion, you are looking out of the galaxy, and also it's more apparent or appears more to us in the nighttime skies from 10 to 2 a.m. or something, more from November to December. So in the months coming up, look for Orion, Google it, watch one of my videos. It is really fantastic, and it actually feels good. If you can look up and see Orion, I get goosebumps. It's really something. Carrie's asking, Jim, do you have a Zoom or article, Orion? Yes, Carrie, I'll have to yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll send it to you an email, but if you have a chance to go to the Aztlander YouTube channel, you'll see one of my videos up there is about the Maya Creation Center in Orion. It's got like 5,000 views. It's actually very uh, well read. And Alex is, if anybody's looking at the chat, Alex Krim has shared a video link. I'm not sure if it's to my video, but he's sharing a video link. If you want to copy and paste that and watch it later, you're interested. And Carrie says, very interesting about the three volcanoes around Altitlan and in Antigua. Also, Eric Christensen from New Zealand says there's a beautiful Chaltoon at Nakbe that is possible to enter. With that,
After seeing the size of that spider at Nakbe, I was kind of like very wary about entering confined spaces underground.
But you didn't see any rattlers?
No,
No.
it's at Nakbe in particular, we get told don't wander off, don't go anywhere without the guide because there's actually a lot of Barbara Maria fertile ants there, and they're very worried about that. But like usually you see the very tip of a tail disappearing into a bush. They're like fertile ants, and you're like, oh, okay, well, so very unusual.
I'd like to make a comment on the tarantulas.
Uh-huh.
I put my hand down on the ground and they tap my finger to make sure I don't move it. When I don't move it, they jump on my hand. When I don't move my hand, they run up on my shoulder. And the students with us like to have them crawling across their face. So if you go on and Google my name and put tarantula, you'll see tarantulas on my hands and my shoulder and my arms. They don't hurt you whatsoever. I don't like them crawling on my face because they're too furry, but the students love it. I like to interact with people and interact with animals.
Right.
And there's also the tail-less whip scorpion. So that means a scorpion with no tail. They're all around my office here in Guatemala City. And I have them also wandering around my hands and stuff like that. So I like to interact with insects. Snakes are a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
And Alex says that yes, the link he's selling at the end of the chat down there is a link to my Orion presentation. Thank you, Alex. And Joel says, good show, Mark. Something that sparked my interest in the lowlands was that a European undergraduate major, I noticed that the golden age of the Maya corresponded with the golden age of the Carolingian Charlemagne dynasty. All right. And Rahimi said, I met friends out in Nevada desert last week for stargazing, and they definitely saw Orion. It's beautiful. So it's good.
And a month from now will be just about the peak of the Orionid meteor shower, which is also virtually around new moon. So it should be a really good one. If we've got clear skies this year, that's going to be kind of like from midnight to sunrise. That should be quite a spectacle, I hope.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mark. This has been excellent. We peaked at 74 people, which is the most attendance in any program this year. So you win the Aztlander 2025 award.
Thanks, Jim.
Everybody's wishing you a happy birthday. Enjoy yourself up there. And you said you're in Philadelphia?
Yep, for the moment. I'll be back in Guatemala next week.
And good luck with the go out for a nice brunch or something with your girlfriend tomorrow and talk about how well you did last night. And with that, everybody, once again, thanks for attending. It really means a lot to me that you're here with us. And I'll end the program. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks so much.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, wait. Don't leave yet. We didn't mention Mark's contact info. And he's got the easiest thing is a Linktree link. It's https://linker.ee/Mark Elmy. And I'll put that in the chat feature right now. Message everyone. Oh, it's not copying it. Oh, darn it. Hey, Sue, did you want to say anything? Let me see if I can get this. All right. So look, Vita put a link to Mark's portals.com website, and I put in the link to all his contact data and where you can find out about his workshops, his podcasts, everything he's got going on. Thanks to the people that have given me your email addresses tonight to be a subscriber to the Aztlander. And somewhere Susan says, have some great cheesecake tomorrow. Cheese steaks tomorrow. All right. So with that, everybody that's kept with us, thank you so much. And I'll end it.
Thank you very much. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Mark. And thanks for watching this Aztlander video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. To subscribe to free monthly issues of the Aztlander, Magazine of the Americas, contact your host, Jim Reed, at jimreedmaya@gmail.com. Thanks again.